I'm use Gretsch as an example. In the 50s, Gretsch was using a 3-ply shell, and it was two plies of maple, one on the inside, one on the outside, and again a thick interior ply of poplar like the Slingerland or the Ludwig. And some of those shells, I wouldn't say that they approach a 1/2 inch, but I would say that they approach 3/8 of an inch, and they get pretty thick. When they went to a 6-ply shell, you can see in some of the snare drums, the 6-ply shells are actually quite a bit thinner than the 3-ply shells. But they're actually stronger because of the cross lamination. And you have 6 things working together to create a stronger bond than you have the 3 soft, or like a big thick ply of a softwood in the center.
And when you say cross lamination, does that mean that the fibers go in
opposite directions? Yeah,
okay.
There are the interior ply on most Gretsch drums run vertically up and down. The grain runs up and down, and then you'll have the next layer in the inside will run the opposite direction to create strength. Rogers, being a 5-ply drum, they were actually a fairly thin shell also, but again they were able to use thinner plies. In the 50s, there was thinning. Yeah, you could get away because the techniques for making drums was improving. You could have a machine that could cut thinner plies of drums more accurately, or excuse me, thinner plies of wood more accurately, and making a stronger, more in-round drum by the late 50s or early 60s. So you're getting better shell construction that way. And a lot of times that will also mean increased resonance and increased ability to tune and get the drum in tune with itself and all those things. And some companies really kept up with the curve, and others were kind of like more concerned with just the way they've been doing it for a long time. Slingerland being one of those. They didn't really change the design of glue rings and thick bearing edges in 3-ply shell up until the 70s. So they didn't have those innovations the way that I'd say Rogers or Gretsch did. So they would tend to use harder woods. Yeah, they would use usually a combination of maple and poplar, or in the case of Gretsch, they used maple and gumwood. I don't know that anybody was doing a straight maple shell in the 60s, and I don't think that was something that was actually happening until the 70s, maybe in Ludwig and Slingerland actually. Otherwise, generally 3-ply drums are a combination of poplar, mahogany, maple, or maple, mahogany, maple, or sometimes mahogany, poplar, mahogany. So you're going to have a combination of those 3 woods. Always a larger interior ply of poplar. And because you have softer woods, they tend to have the sort of top end, the brightness of the drums taken out. Rogers and Gretsch had more maple in their drums. They tend to be a little brighter, tend to project a little more also.
So I have this Tama from the 80s.
Yes.
That's 9 plies of maple.
Yeah.
And
snare
it's like,
drum.
What's that?
Is it a snare drum?
No, it has a metal snare. It's an 8-piece kit.
Okay.
More drums than you could poke a stick at. Is the idea of those drums, like as you got later into the 80s, is the idea that it's like it depends less on the shell then for resonance, or like what was the idea behind doing that kind of stuff?
It's a little bit of both. You depend on the shell for resonance in the sense that you have a stronger, stiffer shell, which will allow you to project the sound that's coming out of the drum head. And anytime we're talking about any of this stuff, we're talking about energy transfer. It's coming from your arm down into the drum head, and that head is going to move the energy into the drum shell, or the drum shell is going to move that energy out in sound, or it's going to absorb it. So if you have softer woods, it's going to absorb more of the sound, and/or you're going to have more of the absorption happen through the bearing edge. And so that is going to give the drum with a softer, thinner shell a different sound than, let's say, a 9-ply sharp bearing edge, straight maple drum shell. That shell is going to project, it's going to be brighter, and it's going to sound big and full, and you're going to get more resonance. The head is going to vibrate more, and it's going to activate easier, and it's also going to stop. It's going to take more to stop that drum head because it's free flow. It's a lot more free to resonate than a drum that has a lot of contact with the drum head.
The next thing I want to ask you about then is dimensions.
Okay.
Obviously, the smaller the drum, the higher the pitch, but also the depth, and how does that play into it?
A smaller drum is going to have a higher pitched sweet spot. And most drums usually do have a sweet spot where you put the drum head on, you get the wrinkles out of the drum head, and where if you have the drum in tune with itself, which we'll talk about in another segment, both top and bottom heads, that the drum will want to speak very naturally within those ranges. We could get the drum to be an actual pitch. We could tap the drum and we could sing that pitch and go to a piano or a guitar or something and play that same note. And those notes on smaller drums are going to be in the higher register. Now, obviously, it's much easier for us to get a lower fundamental out of a 14 by 14 inch drum than it would be out of a 5 by 14 snare drum. So the length of the note and the pitch is determined by the length of the drum. You could get a lower note on a 14 inch drum that was 18 inches deep than you could out of a drum that was 5 inches deep but still 14 inches wide. So there is certainly a relationship between the pitch or the fundamental sweet spot of the drum and the depth, which is why rock drums tend to be a little larger. You need a larger bass fundamental and a little more projection. You're also moving a lot more energy off the drum head itself. You know, if you think about the drum head being sort of like a column, it is certainly a cylinder and a column, but if you had a 10-inch column and you hit the drum, the amount of energy that's coming off the drum head is a smaller amount. There's less surface area, so therefore you're not going to fill up the room in the way that kicking a 22-inch bass drum, which has a lot more surface area on that drum head, would fill up the room a lot easier without a lot less effort. Again, rock drums tend to be 22, 13, 16 to project. There certainly isn't any one way to do any of these things. The most important thing, we're starting kind of talking about tuning now, or getting drums to sound a certain way, and the relationships between the top head and the bottom head and things like that, is you find ways that work, and there are a few things that always work if you want the drum to behave a certain way. But anyway, the Drum Tuning Bible is a good resource for some interesting thoughts about head choices, relationship of depth and diameter, and about tuning techniques and the relationship between top and bottom head. So